Okay, everyone, let's grab our seats. It's officially 8:30 p.m. My name's Ron. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome home. A couple quick announcements. I don't know if you guys follow us on our Facebook page, but December 9th, we are having an all-day workshop mini convention. It's called the December to Remember Spiritual Banquet Conference, and there'll be 5 or 7 speakers. Peter M's coming up from Florida, Marion W. from Florida, Jimmy A. from New Jersey. There's a whole list of them, Sarah I. It's going to be powerful if you never attended one of them. In that type of concentration, it tends to have a very powerful spiritual presence in it over time. So it's absolutely free. We have free lunch. If your sponsor ever said there's no such thing as a free lunch at AA or in the world, you tell me, yeah, we can know where there's one. December 9th. So look it up and see us after that. Our group is constantly doing service, trying to carry this message to alcoholics. We have a commitment every Sunday night at a treatment center in Quakertown. No requirements. If you're interested, see us after the meeting. We're always looking for people that just want to go and just be of service. Maybe you just want to come and listen a couple weeks and be part of it and carry that message and connect with some people, get their numbers, help bridge the gap when they leave that treatment center. It's very powerful. And this group has purchased over 500 big books in the last year. We distribute them. We give them out free to treatment centers because a lot of times they're not even exposed to AA or the 12 steps or a big book. And it's all because of your support, donations, contributions over the years. Anyway, with that, we have the world's best chairperson. Let's welcome Brian up here, see what he's got.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian, and I am an alcoholic. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. That's 301 North Main Street in Doylestown, PA. The food and the fellowship for this group starts at 8 o'clock, and the speaker comes on at 8:30. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday, 7 p.m. to 7:30, so feel free to come early and join us. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others can benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. So if there's anyone that's new or visiting from out of town that would like to introduce themselves on a first name basis so we can welcome you. Yeah. Welcome. Yeah.
Ryan, alcoholic, first time here.
Ryan. Yeah.
Jason, alcoholic, first time here.
Jason. Yeah.
My name's Herbert, I'm an alcoholic.
Welcome. Yeah.
Swan, welcome.
Swan, welcome. Lena, welcome. We get everybody? Awesome, okay. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with a working knowledge of the 12 steps and who is willing to sponsor, please raise their hands. So you can look around the room if you're new. Those are your sponsors. There's always a meeting after the meeting. I always say, hang out, grab somebody after the meeting. We'd love to help you get into the solution a little bit. Are there any announcements from the floor for the good of AA? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Teresa Knopfel.
Teresa.
Jay Walker's Big Book Study in Quakertown is not meeting this Tuesday because of election day, so Jay Walker's is closed this Tuesday. We'll see you the following Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Thanks. Okay, a couple announcements from this group. This group has a sister group, which is a big book study. It meets every Thursday at 7:30, just up the street here at Salem UCC Church. That's 186 East Court Street in Doylestown. The coffee's on at 6:15, so again, feel free to show up early and join us. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put their donations in that jar on the back table marked Big Book and CD Donations. All CDs are available free of charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. We post the speakers from this group on there. We also post speakers from a meeting we have in the room right next to here on Monday, which is at 6 o'clock. It's a step discussion meeting. As Ron mentioned, we also have a Facebook page, a Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. If you want the flyer for that that workshop we're going to be putting on. Other groups post the happenings they have, events, workshops, celebrations, so it's a good resource to have to stay tied in with happenings throughout the area and AA in general. And with that, I believe Mike's going to come up here. He's going to read the Just for Today prayer.
I'm Mike, I'm an alcoholic. Just for today, prayer of recovery. Just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look as well as I can and dress becomingly, talk low, act courteously, criticize no one bit. Sorry, I don't know. Not find fault with anything or not try to improve or regulate anybody except myself. With that, I'll bring up Mary Rose to read the preamble.
And Mary Rose, alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. Next, Michelle.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Michelle.
And I'm reading the AA 12 Steps of Recovery. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. Step 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Thank you, and I'm going to ask Brian to come back up.
Okay, we have a 7th tradition. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. There's no dues or fees for AA membership, but we do have expenses, and your contributions do help us to cover the cost of rent, big books, workshop CDs, the refreshments we provide, so we do appreciate it. There's absolutely no smoking on the church property. We're very privileged to be able to use this beautiful facility to hold our meeting in every week, and they really just ask that we keep the premise clean, so just be considerate of that as you're coming and going from the meeting. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. And now to introduce our speaker for tonight, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group on loan to us from the Bernardsville Daily Reprieve Group. Please help me welcome Jeff from New Jersey.
How's everybody doing? I'm Jeff and I'm alcoholic. Thank you, Ron, for asking me to speak. I'm glad I could fill in. I'm grateful to be here. I always think on the ride up, as I'm coming here, what it was like, 10 years ago when I was coming in AA, and that mind state that I was in. And I feel like today I was able to kind of sit in that a little bit deeper than normal. But first, thank God for another day sober. Last month, actually 2 months ago, September 3rd was my 10-year anniversary. So it's been a little over a decade. And the only thing that's ever came in between me and a drink is Alcoholics Anonymous. A place that I didn't want to come to, that I was embarrassed to come to, that I didn't think would help me. I thought I was too young to be at, that I've come to love. So if there's anything I get across today, I hope it's that I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's really nothing that I could do to pay it back. My goal is hopefully with my story, I can share some hope, some inspiration to somebody in here. That my journey, before, during, and after, would help somebody, if they're new, or if, you have some time, you need some inspiration. So, I drove my truck here today. The truck's in my name, insured. Truck's insured in my name. There's no community service that I'm waiting to go finish up, or for the most part, no one's disappointed with me. And those are all basic things, right? I have a driver's license. Those are all basic things that I couldn't have, before I got here. My perspective on alcohol wasn't a bad one growing up. I really looked up to, the people around me who drank. I just really liked what it looked like it did, I'm the youngest of four, so I would watch my siblings go out and drink. And we just, in our house, we just get in trouble when we put the bottle to our lips, and that's not a prerequisite for being an alcoholic. I know people that became very successful while they were drinking. For us, we start to drink and we just can't stay away from the trouble, So, in my house, my two brothers would go out and get blacked out drunk and come back and piece together what would happen. And it seemed like the excitement always really got my attention. It was something that I looked forward to, that I wanted to participate. It looked very exciting and fun, But I would get two perspectives, right? Since I'm the youngest, then I would see, what my parents would go through before they left and when they came back in the days after. And it would cause a lot of stress. Alcohol was always the center of anxiety, frustration, in my house. And the thing is, it's like we always go out to have a good time. It always starts out like fun. It just doesn't end up that way. So as I start to get older, right, I'm the kid at first, and I'm listening to those stories. I'm listening to my brothers get lectured about, you can't keep doing that. You're not going to be able to stay here. And I become, eventually that guy who's getting those lectures, And I've realized that there's different people I meet in this world. There's people that they grow up around alcoholism and they see what it does, and then they don't ever pick up a drink because of it. And then there's guys like me where that voice that says, this looks like a lot of fun is just so much louder than the one that says this is probably not a good idea. And, despite everything that I would watch with alcohol, I would basically shortly follow in the footsteps of those who came before me. And alcoholism was a terror in not only in our household, but even in like my parents before. I know my mother had a rough time because of alcoholism with her siblings, with her father. Same thing with my dad. My dad is sober, not in the rooms, but he's sober. He had a problem with drinking. He caught it at a point where he was able to give it up on his own. And so as I start to drink, and I started young, not on a regular basis, but the first time that I started to drink, I was probably like 10, 11 years old. I remember taking a drink, and I didn't even like it. It was just something that I knew that I wanted to participate in because the people who I looked up to were doing it. So I drank, I didn't like it. My plan was to never, not worry about it for now. And then by the time I was 15 years old, I got up with four of my friends, and we all split like this bottle of Jim Beam whiskey. I don't even remember where we got it from. And I didn't know then, but I know now that that's when I fell in love with alcohol. I fell in love with it because, you know, we all got drunk, but I feel like what it did for me was different than possibly what it did for the rest of the group that night. You know, I didn't know that I had already been, you know, kind of been driven by so much fear and angst in my life. You know, whether that was from growing up in an alcoholic family or not, I don't know. I just remember how I felt after I started drinking that day. So, like, you know, one scenario of that would be, I was a big wrestler growing up. My father would take me around the state. We would go to different wrestling tournaments. I was pretty good. He would put me in camps. And I was like a routine yearly tournament that I would, you know, wrestle in each year. And I was seeded first. So, you know, it's the first match of the tournament. You know, when you're seeded first, you wrestle the lowest seed, right? The worst guy in the tournament. And I'm halfway through my wrestling match. And I remember I couldn't finish the match. I was probably about 11, 12 years old. I walked off the wrestling match. I just felt like my nerves are just overwhelmed for like no reason. My nerves were shot. And fast forward when I come into AA and I start reading some of the literature and I see like, I think it's the one section in the fourth step where it says, you know, we think fear should be classed with stealing. And I thought back to that day and I realized that at 11 and 12 years old, fear started to steal the joy of me even being able to enjoy a wrestling match. So, you know, when I'm 15 and I start drinking, I think that's the stuff that it starts to set me free from. And really what it allows me to do is kind of just put my shoulders down and be myself. You know, at most for me, what alcohol allows me to do is to be myself. And the journey begins there. All the cuts and scrapes that were to come, not all of them were red flags to me. I watched my siblings get in a lot of trouble when they drank. It wasn't something that, you know, was a huge thing for me. You know, unfortunately, you know, growing up, you know, hiring lawyers and getting out of jams was kind of like a regular thing. You know, you kind of just figure it out and, you know, you try not to do it again. So what started to happen is I would start to get up in the morning, you know, full of anxiety, right? Full of anxiety and embarrassment. Oh man, I said this to this person. Damn, I did that again. I don't know how I got home. And like, you know, then the recollection would start to come in and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. You know, and I gotta, the next time I drink, it's all a matter of to just not let that happen again, you know, and I gotta just stop drinking dark liquor. You know, dark liquor makes me violent. I gotta stick with the clear stuff. Then I was even thinking like, all right, you know what, I remember when I used to smoke, that made me drink less, so maybe I'll start doing that again. And it just became this thing of, you know, control it next time, you know, and that's what the game really became a part of, you know. And every time I would go out and I would put the bottle to my lips, I just wasn't able to do it. It got to a point where, you know, showing up to work 5 days a week was rare. It was tough, you know, and I really wanted to get there because this is another thing, like. Thank God I have really good parents, right? So my parents instilled in us, you want to be a good person, you want to do well, you want to get a good job, and you want to become a good person in that company. And the reason why that plays a part in me getting sober is because I had a lot of friends who didn't have that. So for them to not show up on work on a Friday wasn't a big deal. They would just say, you know what, whatever, I just won't go back. I'll collect unemployment for 6 months and then I'll try to find something else. For me, I always felt like I was disappointing myself. I was disappointing other people around me, and I wasn't meeting up to the bar that I was trying to set for myself, the standard that I was trying to live up to. And that would help me to feel, you know, I would feel low every time that I got up and I didn't follow through, you know. When I was 20 years old, my two brothers and I, we all gathered together. We were sitting, we were meeting, we were sharing some stuff, and my oldest brother died that night. He was mixing some drugs and alcohol. He went to sleep and he never woke up. Now, that was the first, that really cut me through the bone when that happened. Of course, my brother meant a lot to me, but one of the things he was able to do, and maybe it was because of the age difference between us, he was able to kind of create an environment for me where I was able to feel, you know, to be myself. So when I lost him, that was tough for me. I didn't really want to continue my drinking, so I tried to switch gears and I started dabbling in some other things because I was afraid. I knew enough about my drinking at that time that I was afraid of what I would do, you know. But I found something else. And what I've discovered in here is that alcohol is just a symptom, right? Sobriety is my problem, you know? So for the next 3 years, I basically became secluded from a lot of my friends. All my self-esteem was gone. My pride was gone, you know? And I got to a place where all I wanted to do was go back out and be a part of the crowd with my friends. You know, and I think about, you know, even though I was drinking alcoholically prior to that, you know, to me it was the only normal. It was the only normal life. You know, to me, even though it was insane, you know, it was the only normal life to me. So I end up in rehab for the first time in 2010. Now, while I'm in rehab, it was the first time that I heard someone mention to me total abstinence from alcohol. And I entertained it the first week. But what I've learned from Alcoholics Anonymous is that we deal with a problem that centers between our ears. And one of the ways that manifests is in an obsession. So the first week that I'm in there, I'm entertaining the idea of total abstinence. By the second week, you know, I'm starting to think about times that I had a good time when I drank. You know, I'm fantasizing in my head about, you know, holding up a shot glass with my friends in the bar. And then by the third week, I'm asking other people what they're doing. You know, and then by the time I get out of there, I get drunk within 2 days of being out of that rehab. And life had been upside down at that time, right? I had lost everything. My brother was gone. Like, there was some serious pain going on. And when I was in that rehab, I wasn't spending so much time thinking about, oh, you know, where can I head to a meeting when I get out of here? How can I make that right with my family, you know, for the things that I took and all these things. I would say probably about 85% of the time that I was in that rehab, I was thinking about if I could have a drink when I leave. And that's why I stand no chance with sobriety, you know, because the further I get away from the drink, the thirstier I get and the crazier I get, because then I'll start trying to think that I can do it. And there's a saying, I think it's the jumping off place, right? We got to get to a place where we can't see life with or without alcohol. And I was at a place where I couldn't see life without alcohol. So even though I was honestly filling out those first step forms, because unfortunately where I grew up, we're proud of the stupid stuff we do when we drink, you know? So I'm in small groups sharing all these stories like it's something to be proud of, you know, going through how I'm powerless, how my life is unmanageable, why I shouldn't drink. But it didn't even... There was nothing that I think I could have heard at that time that would have kept me sober. So when I got out of there, I was walking in the mall and I remember telling one of my friends, I'm like, you know, they're saying I probably shouldn't do anything. And then we walked in. I really do not remember where the conversation went. I just remember we walked into Charlie Brown's. It was probably about 11:30 in the morning, and I ordered a double shot of Jaeger. And just like that, I was right back. And this time, the alcohol really kicked up full force, you know. I learned about the insanity in here. You know, there was things, you know, when I came in, I would think, you know, insane, like doing the same thing twice, expecting different results. I remember I had a brand new Volkswagen Jetta, right? And I was a habitual drunk driver. Thank God nothing ever happened. And I was driving drunk. I looked back this way, I sideswiped the car. I broke the fender, the grill, and the headlight. So I bring the car to get fixed, and I think I picked up in about a week. I picked up the car, I drove it, I was doing donuts drunk in the snow, and I slid into a minivan, and I just broke the headlight. The same stuff that I just paid to get fixed within a week was just broke. I went back, the mechanic looked like, you know, like he was crazy. And for the longest time, I thought the insanity was that I wrecked my car twice. But the insanity that I learned in here was that I picked up that car sober, picked up a drink, and I thought it would be different this time. You know, and then that's in the beginning. And then towards the end, I'm going to the liquor store knowing what's going to happen, but I'm going anyway. You know, so you know, it kicks off full force. And I heard someone saying AA, and I think it came from the grapevine. AA, alcohol gave me the wings to fly and then took away the sky. And that couldn't be truer for me, because it always starts out like it's working out. You know, and when I get out and I accomplished what I wanted to. I wanted to be back in the mix. I wanted to be back around my friends. I wanted to be having a good time. And it started out that way, and then here we go again. I can't show up for work. The car accidents, the DWIs, the disappointments. You know, I would walk in the house and my father would basically have like newspaper articles of people who killed somebody, you know, drunk driving, and just to try to like leave them out so I would see them and maybe not do it again the next time, you know, and nothing would ever work. I remember recording stuff on my phone to try to, you know, not drink again, you know, listen to it before I went to the store. Nothing would ever work. You know, I tried to draw on that power of losing my brother. You know, I thought about that. I was like, you know, my brother meant a lot to me. I'm going down the same path as him. That wasn't enough to keep me sober. You know, I ended up in a relationship, and that, you know, fear also stole the ability of me to get close to anyone, because deep down inside, I really didn't like who I was. So in a weird way, I would go out of my way to get somebody to fall in love with me, and then as soon as I seen that, I didn't want nothing to do with them. But alcohol helped with that at the beginning. You know, it allowed me to form a bond with somebody, and then what starts to happen is the real me comes out. And when I drink, I get nasty to all the people who care about me the most, you know, because deep down inside, I'm truly unhappy. You know, I'm unhappy about my condition. I'm unhappy with what's going on. And so that relationship, you know, it starts out and I'm hiding the alcohol. I'm waking up with those big letters written on the, you know, on the dresser. I am not happy. This can't continue. And, you know, I would apologize and truly mean it. You know, I really don't want to keep doing what I was doing. And then I would go out with the intentions to not let it happen again, and it would always just happen again. So as this starts to go on, I knew in the back of my head that I had this drinking problem. I just believed that one day something was gonna, I guess, give me the power to either have some control, whether it was quit forever or be able to not get so drunk anymore. I just didn't know how that was gonna happen, and time would just go by. You know, in my eyes, what I would do is after a rough night, I would tell myself, next Monday I'm starting. That's it. I'm joining the gym. I'm putting down the alcohol, and then that would just basically allow me to get drunk in peace from that moment to that Monday. And then Monday came, and what would happen? Sobriety would hit me. I would get up sober, and I might last a day, I might last 2 days, I might last 3 days. But by that third day, I either didn't pay attention to that idea anymore, or it just totally got dismissed. And the people who care about me, when they confront me about my drinking, you know, early on, I look at them like they're a nag, right? You're down my back. You're the reason I'm drinking. I should just die, right? To try to make them feel bad. And towards the end, I get defiant, or we argue, because the truth really is I don't know why I keep doing what I'm doing. You know, to me, it's like, do you think that I want to keep flushing my life down the toilet? Do you think that I want to keep, you know, swimming upstream and having such a difficult time? If I had an answer for you why I'm drinking like this, I would give it to you. I don't have it. I don't know what to do. So I ended up getting court mandated to come to AA. I got court mandated to come to AA in 2013. 2012, I was pushing it off. And the drink started to catch up with me faster, and I was getting ready to lose that relationship. So in order to try to save that relationship, get a couple court papers signed, and then there was a small piece inside of me that I knew something took place here. Before my brother died, he ended up putting together 90 days in the rooms, and he did become different in a short time. You know, he looked healthy. The way he was conducting himself, he was showing up to work, you know, every day. He was doing the right thing. He just seemed very determined. You know, determined, and he was taking care of himself. And I never see him do that before. So I knew that something took place here. And then what happened is he relapsed. And his plan was to come back here after New Year's and died on New Year's Eve. Now, when I go to that meeting, I already been drinking. I showed up late, and I go in there. You know, I didn't really want to see anybody I knew, but I look across the room and I see a guy that grew up with my brother, and I ended up talking to him after the meeting. He was very, very enthusiastic about the program. You know, I got a sponsor. I just celebrated 90 days. I have a home group. You got to come. It kind of weirded me out, to be honest with you. I was like, you know, but when he shared with me what, like, where he went with his drinking, something just kind of like organically opened up to me to start sharing him what I was doing. And part of knowing that I needed some help mixed with like being a little bit of a people pleaser, I started tailing around with him to meetings. Now, as I started to go into meetings, this is like March of 2013, some key things happened in the next few months. I started to learn what it meant to be an alcoholic, you know. And the thing that sticks out to me was, you know, as I started to read the book, as I started to have a sponsor and learn some stuff, hear people in the meetings, was that on my own, I was never going to get better, you know. And that became clearer to me as I would relapse and go out and come back, and the pain would get greater. It's read in How It Works. Without help, it is too much for us. And that became truer for me. The problem was I didn't like AA. You know, I didn't want to have to come, you know, here. I felt like I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like, I got to be in here because of the way I drink, but I want to be out there with all my friends who look like they're having a good time. And, you know, drinking and the pain that comes with alcohol could be, you know, a great persuader. You know, so as that started to pick up and I started to come to meetings, you know, it just started to, the pain started to sink deeper and deeper. So by, I think the first time that I had any type of, you know, days put together was in July. I put together 45 days of sobriety. And I had, you know, I hit this bottom, man. Like my girlfriend left me. I was losing everything else, and I had enough pain at the time to like get the ball rolling. And I was able to put together 45 days. And in that 45 days, you want to call it spiritual sickness, stinking thinking, it started to creep in, you know, because what it started to look like in that particular situation, you know, I would think about, man, I'm at the lowest point in my life and she leaves. Then it would switch into, I'm just a POS, like who would want to be with me? I'm an alcoholic, you know. I'm never going to meet anybody else. What's my life going to look like? And then it would switch into just being like, you know what? I'm just going to become super successful, get in great shape, post it all over Facebook. She's going to see it. She'll realize what she lost. It'll be too late. And the thing is that I can't go back to the alcohol or nothing else. I'm sober now, so what's the next best thing? Is a new relationship, right? So I'm in AA, and I meet somebody on Instagram. I got no license, so you got to come pick me up. And I'm like, you know what? Can you pull over for 1 second? And just like that, I walk into a liquor store. I grabbed 6 airplane bottles. I took 3 back right in the store. I put 3 in my pocket. And what's that saying? I couldn't bring it to mind with sufficient force the pain and suffering from a month and a half ago. You know, like I couldn't rely on the way that I felt just a month and a half ago, which was low. I mean, like I felt like I was literally welcoming the idea of being taken out of my misery. I was purposely driving without my seatbelt. Like, you know, I was like over it, you know. You know, I had lost my brother. Like my life is heading down the tubes. I can't hold anything. I can't hold a relationship. I can't hold the driver's license. I can't keep the job because I can't show up there, and I can't stay sober. And the thing was, I had some experience, a little bit of experience in AA. So at that time, you know, I like it hit me when I started drinking. I'm like, man, that was a mistake. You know, but like the poison, and we all know that in here, right? Once the poison's in you, it doesn't really matter what you think about it. Like, you know, it's game on now. So I was trying to show up to meetings and stay sober, and I couldn't. So I went back to that rehab on like a 2-week trip. They took me back on like a relapse program. And while I was in that rehab, I go through detox. I come out, and I remember sitting on my bed, you know, and I was writing my mother a letter. I'm hitting her with all the AA lingo that I learned, you know, because my MO is like, you know, when I realize I did something wrong to you and I'm sorry for it, I expect you to get over it immediately. You know, and then someone in AA told me, you know, when you start a fire, you're responsible for the heat. And I was like crying as I was writing this letter, but I didn't send it. And I ended up giving it to my mother after 2 years sober, but it started to hit me at the time. What the surrender came upon me. Because I stopped resisting, you know, and all like the sayings that I hear, time takes time, and I realized at that moment that it didn't matter. I didn't need to fix anything. Like, I just need to worry about coming in here one day at a time and working an AA program, because there is going to be no life for me if I don't. You know, there will be no relationship. This is just what I need to know. I'm dying here. I'm tired of bringing pain and suffering to the table, frustration. And honestly, I wanted to break the chain for my family, for me and my family. My other brother was still active drinking, just like me, that was alive. And he had already been through cancer. He had a rough road too. But I knew that I didn't have the power within me to do that. And it was probably from what I heard in AA, because I didn't grow up in a religious household. I dropped to my knees and I prayed like I never prayed before in my life. And I was just praying because I just wanted to live like everybody else that it seemed like was around me, right? Is that I felt like everyone else had life available to them. And because of this drink, this weight on my shoulders, it just held me back. I would take 2 steps forward and 7 back. And the resistance that I had prior to that in AA was gone. And I felt like it was replaced with a willingness, a willingness to do the things that I didn't think were going to work for me. I was uncomfortable calling new people, so I started calling people. I had a whole routine that my sponsor had me doing in the morning. And a meeting that I could go to every single night of the week, whether I rode my bike or someone can pick me up. And I got to it. My sponsor, we would meet. And my sponsor's an interesting guy. He was a guy who spent 32 years in AA without any step work. And said it was a horrible ride for him, and he got to a place where he was basically kind of ready to end his life while being sober for 32 years. And he had this epiphany, long story short, and he met with somebody and he got involved in the steps and he had an awakening after 32 years. I met him 5 years after that. So when I got with him, he was very like, we got to get you into the work, we got to get you into the book, this is what you need to do. And I had heard that in rehab, so I was enthusiastic because I'm a guy that I want to come in, knock the 12 out, and then see you later, and go back on with my life. So as I start doing this, and I'm conducting myself in a different way every day. I'm starting my day in a way that I never had thought would be helpful. Becoming open to things. And I remember riding my bike home from a meeting at like 90 days, and just having this overwhelming sense of gratitude because it was like, oh my God, like I got 90 days. Like I was never able to do that. But it was also a feeling of like, I'm genuinely starting to like the way that this feels. I'm starting to see life at the end of the tunnel. For a long time, I couldn't see because I'm like, how am I going to do, what's life going to look like sober? Where am I going to meet somebody? Where am I going to go? And I'm like, man, I really like the way that I'm feeling. I like the way that I'm living. People were telling me, you look different. You're starting to sound different. Your eyes are really white, and so it like became a motivator. And the drink is always at the bottom of it all, but it started to get, catapulted with the way that I was feeling from going through this process. And I didn't realize how much of a prison that I lived in between my ears, and for me, one of the biggest spiritual awakenings that I had was writing a deep 4-step, and just like I feel like AA is just full of surrenders, you know what I mean? Like you just got to surrender thing one after the other, and there's freedom within that. And one of the things, just like I have to, accept that I'm an alcoholic, that I can never use alcohol safely, and there's a lot of reasons why. In that 4-step, the epiphany I had was that I can't afford to look at things a certain way anymore. That I have no choice. I have to look at them in a different way. And when I started looking at these relationships in my life in a different light like that, it literally set me free. And it's like one of those things, like I don't know if you've experienced that, where you have like maybe a stressful thing going on in your life, but it doesn't really seem stressful until it's over. And then you realize how relieved you were after it's over. And it was kind of like that. Wow. And another big one was sharing that with somebody, and if someone's going through this right now, I didn't get fully honest the first time. I held things back. I remember my sponsor asking me, is there anything else that you want to talk about? And I'm like, no, I think that's it, And I left there, and it seemed like every meeting that I went to, somebody was bringing up how they didn't fully, do their 5th step, and they ended up drinking again. So I go to this meeting, and this guy shares, and he's like, we're reading the book at my house. And I just thought that they were reading and sharing. So I go there, and they're going back through the steps. And I had finished my steps at this time, but I just, wanted to join them. And they were getting in deeper. They're like looking up definitions, for words, and, smashed. Something that's broken apart and can't be put back together. And I'm like, these guys get deep over here, And So when we got to that point, they were getting so deep that they encouraged me, and I called up my sponsor and I was like, I got to meet back up with you. And I shared with him things that I thought I would never share with anybody, because one of the principles that I used to live by was that men take things to the grave, right? Men don't show feelings and emotions. And this was getting vulnerable and being honest down to the root. And I'll tell you, when I left there, I felt like all those promises that are written in the book, being able to look the world in the eye, like I experienced them and then read it and was like, wow, that is exactly what happened. Because what's that saying, that the eyes are the window to the soul? I didn't realize it until prior to that. I thought when I looked at people, they looked right through me. I was coming in here struggling. People looked like they never had a drink in their life. They're doing well, I got my bike locked up to the tree out front. And, when I released that, I had a freedom. I had a freedom in that. These guys taught me, and the guy that would have me come over there, he would cook dinner for us, huge plates, looked like trays, and he would make all this smothered chicken and stuff, and we would do the step work and get better, and these guys showed me how to do it here. But I think one of the biggest takeaways that I got from my first sponsor is that I always need to be in the neighborhood of continually trying to grow spiritually. That's like what I can. He had me write down a quote. I think it was, among us AAs is the ever-present need for further spiritual development. God help me remember that. And it's so true, because what I think is going to work for me is just always off, and my spiritual condition, the way that I feel on a daily basis, what's going through my head, is directly proportional to my insanity to alcohol. The only time in the last 10 years, and I think it's because I've been vigilant, and I don't work a perfect program, I'm not trying to paint a perfect picture here, but I consider myself vigilant on trying to do the things I need to do. Only one time did I think that insanity started to return. It was during COVID too. I was out of the meetings, I had some stuff going on, I wasn't sleeping, my routine was off, and I remember going through the bank drive-through, and I was sitting in the bank drive-through, and I think I had about 7 years sober, and I remember thinking to myself, pretty successful guy these days, man. Like, I don't know that I would fly off the handle like I used to. And I know enough from being in here that that's like bells, whistles, red flags, like, call in reinforcements, because that right there, whether it was a week away or a year away, that's heading towards the drink right there, because that's the insanity returning. And I know enough to jump back in here, and that was it. But that was based on what I do on a daily basis, And because of this program, the relationships in my life, I have real relationships in my life today. Not like those ones where I just hang out with a million people because we drink together. Like relationships where we really care for one another and we can show up and really help one another. And especially with my family. My brother being one of them. My brother was a guy where, we were always in conflict, because we operate on three things: fight, flight, or freeze. You say something I don't like, we either get into a fist fight or I never speak to you again. And that's how we used to operate. So there was always like a point where we were, something would happen and we never talked for 3 months. And that hasn't been that way once. After I finished the steps, I get a call from my brother, and he's like, I'm at the end of my rope. I can't keep doing this anymore. I can't show up for my daughter. I don't want to live anymore, Jeff. And I'm like, look, just do what I did. Go to rehab. He went to rehab. I hooked him up with a sponsor, and he jumped right in. We're about 10 months apart in sobriety. We do this thing together, and it really has changed the dynamic in our house. We were two guys that just brought frustration, fear, and anger to the people around us who cared about us the most, and it's not that way anymore. I know that when I show up to my mother and my father's house, that they're thrilled to see me, that the last few times that I got to spend with my grandmother, that she was genuinely thrilled to see me, and she had a rough time because of this disease. She raised 6 kids on her own because my grandfather was a gambler and an alcoholic, and he left. So, as a result of that, my brother comes in, he starts doing better. And I didn't think that, honestly, this was going to work for my brother. My brother was one of those guys, got in trouble, couldn't be in regular school, you know, and I'm like, he's gonna come to the meeting, someone's gonna, you know, he's gonna have a confrontation, he's gonna leave. But really, we just have one more, you know, if you're able to be honest, this can work for you, you know, and it worked for him. You know, today, so 10 and a half years ago, I was riding my bike to a liquor store in the morning when it opened, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. I was full of fear, anger. I didn't know what my life was going to look like. Today, because of AA, I was able to get back in that relationship. So my girlfriend at the time, she couldn't surround herself with me at that time. She left, and it wasn't like a break. We were done. And one day, as I'm getting sober here, my sponsor was like, listen, don't reach out to her. You got bigger fish to fry. And I knew that. It was just hard, right? So I'd be getting ready to send a text and delete it. And one day I was riding my bike to a gym, and I'm like, let me take a different way. So I'm taking my bike up. She's turning the corner here in a different car. I look through the windshield. We see each other. I get to the gym. I get a text. Hey, how you been? And we ended up rekindling that relationship. The thing was, I had to let go of that. It was one of many things that I had to let go of the control, right? So what I want to do is I want to smother things. I want to control it, make it work out. And it was early on, one of the things that I had to let go, leave up to God to see what he's going to work out. Fast forward in 2021, we get married. We pushed it off in 2020 because of COVID. This month, my son will be a year old. That's been probably the biggest gift for me, but the hardest thing that I've ever done. I've been so tired, like, you know, it's just, I don't even know how, like, I think about when I used to think I was tired, like, how, like, that was even, like, you know, I operate on half of what I thought that I needed before. But it's been the biggest joy to me, honestly, you know, and I was able to be there sober. My son is such a joy, man. I love that little boy with all my heart, you know, and I'm grateful that I'm able to be here sober, you know, for him, and be there with my wife and participate, you know. But the reality is I had to keep my priorities straight, and the priorities is that recovery and AA have to come first. During that time, the first like 6 weeks, I'm operating on 3 hours of sleep. My routine, there is no routine, right? Because there is no morning. And when you're up all night, like it's just a continuation. Not being able to go to as many meetings. And this, above all, I think it's in the chapter, We Employers, right? Which is a great chapter. And some of the things they say in there that to get sober, you have to have a transformation of thought and attitude and a change of heart. And that we must place recovery above all else, or we'll lose all else. And that's been so true in my life, even with my newborn baby. And I'll tell you what, another thing is that my experience prior to my son is giving it up to God and doing that third step and letting God run my life was so much easier before he came in, right? Because once he came in, now I think I need to control things because I care so much about him, right? Oh, I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to happen. And let me tell you something, when that starts to come in, I don't like being around me, and neither does nobody else, you know, full of frustration. All those bedevilments return, frustration, fear, you know, all those things come back as a result of that, you know. And I had another surrender just recently where I had to let that go, you know, give that up to God. That these are things that are out of my control. And you know, like what was that I wanted to bring up? And work. So today I'm able to run a business. I'm a partner with my brother in a real estate business, and then I run an electrical company. And every day I get up and I have the opportunity to do two things. I have an opportunity to go make money, or I have an opportunity to be of service. And when I go out and I have the attitude that I want to go and make money, I'm always full of fear, anxiety, stress. So when I first started doing that, I had this lady, she called me up, she said, hey, I need you to rewire my house. And I'm working by myself at the time. She had with like knob and tube wiring. The basement's finished, the attic's finished, and that's an electrician's nightmare. I can't get to nothing. So I'm like, I'm thinking about ways of getting out of this job. You know, I go home, I'm like, man, I underpriced this thing. Like, I'm going to tell her that I don't have the time. I apologize. I'll hook her up with somebody else. And I was like full of fear, and then I prayed on it, and I'm like, you know what? You're making this about you. You know, like, why don't you make this about her and just worry about doing a good job for her and fixing her house, and that's it. Don't worry about nothing else. Don't worry about the money. And as soon as I started doing that, the job started to go smoother. You know, I wasn't in my head the whole time there wishing that I could leave. When I completed the job, the lady comes up to me and she gives me a huge, she's like, I just want to thank you so much for getting rid of this wire. And I was so scared. She was like, my son, when he was 26 years old, was electrocuted and killed. He worked for a cable company, and he came in contact with something and he died. Those are opportunities that I miss probably on a daily basis, because my natural position is to make everything about me. You know, and what I feel like by doing this program, and I can have that shift and go out and not be about me all the time, I'm able to do things like that. And sponsorship's one of them, you know. That's probably one of my favorite things to do. Like, you know, I love working with alcoholics. Somebody said to me recently, they're like, well, you could be service to your family. I'm like, of course, and I love doing that too. But there's something about working with alcoholics that I truly love. I found that this disease, by working with others, I get to see how nasty this thing is even more. That it's just so cunning, baffling, and powerful. I have a guy that I was speaking to earlier today, and I've been trying to help him out since 2018. The same thing happens every single time. He ends up having to go to detox, go to rehab. He comes out of rehab, he's super gung-ho about the program, right? We start working the steps, and everything else becomes more important. You know, Jeff, I'm really hurting on money because I was out of work, that time when I was in rehab. I got to pick up some overtime. The meetings start to cut back. The times we meet up, I'm like, hey, are you doing your morning routine? Not as much, because I got to get to the gym at 5 a.m. and it's the only time that I really have time to get there. And literally every single time, he doesn't realize, and they'll see it after he starts drinking again, but every single time that happens, he ends up drunk within 5 months, 6 months, And it's just, it's tough to watch, It's tough to watch because this disease, like what it did to me, right? Alcoholism is so tricky that it conned me to participate into something that robbed me from the ability to have my older brother. It's cunning, it's baffling, it's powerful. And I think everything that I try to do, I think that I have control when I start, and I don't. And that's the delusion here, the delusion that takes so many people. I've lost so many friends in here because of that. And it keeps me on my A game, knowing that I have to stay on top of this. Was it 2 weeks ago, I went to a steakhouse. And while I was in there, I seen this guy, and I'm like, I didn't want him to see me. And I'm like, man, about 18 months prior to that, there was a miscommunication with the waiter. And, he messed up the order, and it ended up being like 3 times as much, right? There was a thing there, and I was so pissed that I left there. I didn't leave the guy a tip. And I thought about it, I'm like, I should go back there and I should leave that guy a tip. Like, I felt bad about that. And I'm like, nah, then it's going to be like this thing. Like, whatever, I'll just leave it alone. It's water under the bridge. And then one of my indicators is if I need to make an amends to somebody is if I go somewhere and I don't want you to see me, that's a problem. And when I was in there, I'm like, man, I got to my table, I'm like, I owe that guy an amends. So my waiter came over, I'm like, can you call that guy over here? And he remembered too. He was like, it's not a big deal. It was actually really nice. He was like, it's not a big deal. And I ended up giving him his tip. The thing is like, I can't operate on those things anymore. That guilt, that shame, that come from not conducting myself. Because what I've learned with AA is that AA is a set of principles that I must live by. And at the end of the principles are a promise. I used to live by feelings all the time, and I sometimes can still do, but at the end of them, they're nothing, because they vary from day to day. And it's a foundation. Like in the book, they talk a lot about, these structures, these foundations, and I've come that to be true. I feel like that this has helped me in so many areas of my life. Sobriety, with family, with work, and it's because of that. It's because of foundation. The foundation underlies everything. You look at a house, the kitchen, the bathroom, so that when I have this as my foundation, the rest of my life comes together. And I used to always say, God willing, but I've come to find God is always willing. Sometimes I'm not so willing, and that's the difference. So on a daily basis, remaining willing to practice these principles, you know, in all my affairs has been something that, you know, I need to do on a daily basis. To not only stay sober, but to be happy. And that's really what it is that I know that alcohol is always there waiting, but on a daily basis, the way that I try to live is to try to have serenity, right? When I do this stuff, I have serenity. When I don't, I don't. And then that creates that reality where if I stay in that place for a long time, I get thirsty, you know? And again, I'm no, you know, I'm no fun. I'm no fun to anybody. I'm no fun to be around. You know, it's just not it's not a good place to be. You know, so I'm just grateful that I was able to come here tonight. Grateful to be able to share, and I want to thank you guys for letting me share.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Brian. I'm an alcoholic. First and foremost, I want to thank Jeff for coming out here tonight, delivering an incredible message of hope and recovery with our group here. A couple quick announcements, and we'll close down the meeting here. Again, the food and the fellowship for this group always starts at 8 o'clock. Feel free to show up early, enjoy the coffee and the refreshments that we put out. If you want to get involved with some service, we have service positions available. You can help set up the meeting, greet, stuff like that. As Ron mentioned, this group also has commitments in hospitals and institutions in the area. So if you'd be interested in doing something like that, bringing a message of hope and recovery to the sick and suffering, you know, you can see me, see Ron after the meeting. There's always a meeting after the meeting. If you want to help us out with some service work, we could always use help putting the chairs away. But more importantly, if you're out there and if you're new or if you're struggling, grab somebody after the meeting, get you some numbers. We can get you information on some of those meetings if you're interested. Also worth mentioning, there's a meeting 6 a.m. every morning. Is it every morning or 6 days a week? Every morning, 6 a.m. It's in the room right on the other side of this wall here in this church. It's customary for us to thank our speakers as they come here on their own time and expense, so we usually form a line here in the front, and we thank our speakers personally. Thanks to everybody for helping out with the meeting. Thanks to everybody that helped set up. Thanks to our greeters, our readers. Thanks to Jack in the back there for taking care of the kitchen. And most importantly, let's thank our speaker, Jeff, one more time. And if you do care to join us, we have a nice way of closing. We circle up now. We circling up now? We're circling up now. Just don't tell anybody. And we'll close down the meeting here with a brief moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic inside and outside of these rooms, followed by our Lord's Prayer. Our Father,